Hello everyone, you're listening to the Earful Tower podcast. This is a show brought to you by the audiobooks from French Today. More on them at the end of the episode. But it's not all fun and games around here at the Earful Tower. Sometimes we tackle some serious stuff, and that's what's happening this week. You may have remembered in April 15th, of course you remember this, April 15th, 2019, the Notre Dame Cathedral burned. And it didn't burn to the ground, but it turns out it wasn't far from it. Now, it's been 7 months since that tragedy, and funnily enough, there are almost more questions now than there were at the time. Now that the dust has settled, I thought I'd sort of dig a little deeper and figure out where we are and what's going to happen next. So I paid a visit to the mayor of the 4th arrondissement of Paris, the district where the Notre Dame Cathedral is, and I sat down with Ariel Weil to talk about the Notre Dame. But while I was in the office with him, we had a chat about where he was, exactly what he was doing as the fire was raging. And it's a pretty fascinating experience from his perspective alone. You're going to hear about it, but he was in some pretty exclusive company at the time of the fire. But also we talk about what's coming up next. Where are we going to go for the Notre Dame? Are we going to be able to visit it soon, or is that way further off in the timeline? You guys probably won't be too excited about the answers. But that's what you're in for today, a talk about the Notre Dame Cathedral. I hope you enjoy it. I'll be around at the end of the episode to talk about French Today and to read out some emails from you listeners. Let's get into it. Monsieur le Maire, Ariel Weil. My pronunciation has improved since last time we met, I think. I went back and watched the video, our last video from 10 months ago, where, incidentally, I don't know if you remember, we were standing out the front of the Notre Dame talking about it, and then just months later, everything changed.
My God, I just realized that the first time that we went around, it was still there, up there.
Yep, I watched it this morning. There's a section where you and I are standing at the back of it, and we're talking about the complicated architecture. Yeah. And in fact, you were talking about how there's a lot of scaffolding and there's a lot of work going on.
I was probably talking about the spire already.
I think you mentioned it as well. So things have changed since then. I think what we should do is rewind to the night that the Notre Dame was on fire, and you walk me through where you were and how you felt.
Yeah.
Where were you?
I can tell you I was at the City Hall, the Central City Hall, and I came out shortly before 7 p.m. And the first thing I saw is I saw a bunch of fire trucks racing down the Rue de Rivoli, and they were racing down the bike track.
As in the wrong way down Rivoli? Or?
Right, and I remember thinking, in fact, I started pulling out my camera and say, I want to shoot this because, and this is a great use of the bike lane, right?
Right.
In case of emergency,
sure.
There are best ways to go and cut the traffic, and we've been saying that for so long. And we still hear sometimes people saying, well, it's dangerous, it reduces the number of lanes for traffic. And in fact, it's the opposite. And so I wanted to demonstrate that. And I thought, okay, well, thanks God, the fire trucks are able to go wherever they have to go, thanks to the bike lanes. And I think everyone in the community of bikers feels good about that. And so I started pulling my phone, not knowing where they were heading to. And then I walked around the City Hall. I had a meeting in the 2nd district, actually. And when I walked, I saw everyone staring and starting to take pictures. Then I noticed the fire a little bit before 7 p.m.
So that was early days, really.
Yeah.
It was.
And my first reaction was to start running towards. I thought, this is happening on the island, and I started racing down. And then I pulled out my phone and I made three quick phone calls. I called the captain of the fire department, my district fire department.
Right.
And he immediately told me who was in charge, and they were going to call me and brief me. I then called the chief of police locally, who said she was going to meet me over there. She was on her way. And my third call was to the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo. And she told me, she picked up immediately and she said, I'm coming down, wait for me.
Right.
And she was there in 2 minutes. So I waited for her on the bridge. I started walking towards there.
Which bridge? I'm trying to picture it.
The Pont de Notre Dame, the Pont d'Arcole, which is the one that's going towards the porch, the main porch of Notre Dame. So we walked there. I waited for her. She was there in no time. She was already on her way down the stairs when I called. Remember, her office is facing straight to Notre Dame. And
right. Was she in her office at the time?
Yeah, she was in a meeting in her office, and she had the alarm, but she picked up the phone immediately, said, Ariel, I'm coming down. And so we went there together. We arrived there really in front of Notre Dame at the corner of the street that borders the cathedral, which is the Rue du Cloître Notre Dame. And when we were there was no one. And it's strange when I look back to this evening. We had to go a little bit farther at some point because the firemen needed the space. But we stayed pretty close to where we were at the beginning, except when we got there at around 7, there were maybe 10, 20 people around. And when I lifted my head a few hours later, after I'd taken care of a number of things, there were maybe hundreds of people.
And where you were standing, could you feel the heat?
We, not so much the heat as much as the noise and the projections. And so I remember that I got there with the mayor, and I had a phone call to the head of the church in Paris, and they put on the phone the Archbishop of Paris.
Right.
So I said a few words, and I handed the phone to the mayor, and she spoke to him, and then my first reaction was we gotta get the people out of there. So I fell onto the head of the local citizen council, and I asked her. I said, I want you to call everyone that you know. She happens to live on that street, and I said, I want you to call everyone and tell them to get out.
The houses that
out of the buildings that were facing the cathedral. And the order hadn't been made yet. By then, no one was allowed inside the small circle, but they weren't getting people out of their buildings. So that was my first reaction. I started telling her to call, and then I said, come with me, let's go get them out. There's only like 7, 8, 9 buildings max on that street.
The buildings where there's that old sort of hospital as well?
No, I'm talking really truly the street, the portion of that street that is a few meters away from the cathedral where it was burning. Right. There's only a portion of that street, Rue du Cloître.
I know what you mean.
The Cloister Street, Rue du Cloître Notre Dame. Yeah. And that street has maybe 8 buildings. Yeah. And so we started going. I said, come with me, and we started going down the street. And I started calling people on the at the windows, and I said, get down, get out.
And this sounds like quite a practical response. But was there panic? When you're on the phone to the Archbishop and then talking to the different mayors and so on, was there panic around, or was it kind of more, okay, we've got to act?
Look, I think I saw a number of people in that evening. There were people that came because they were officials and didn't know what to do, but I think most of us were pretty busy. I think from that point on, I think my automated response was, okay, now let's get things in order. And I spent much of the evening back to back with the mayor of Paris, and every one of us. She was sending people to do things, and I was using my phone because my team was scattered around. Everyone were in strategic position. My chief of staff was in the emergency was a war room that we opened. Some of my staff were at the place that we opened for people to host people that were out of their homes. Others were staying here so they could direct people. So it's managing that through the phones.
And how was she reacting? Was she freaking out?
The mayor?
Yeah.
No, I think what I witnessed that evening is we were close to each other, barely talking to each other because we were so busy giving orders. But I think from the very beginning, I remember that moment when I'm on the phone and she has people and she's giving instructions to people around her that immediately leave and start running to execute the orders. And I'm making the same thing over the phone to my team. And I remember that we had the can't remember exactly what his title is, but he's the archpriest, not the archbishop, the archpriest who knows inside out the church. In fact, was there when the fire broke out, and he came out and he was the one that said, "We got to save the treasury. We got to save all the art pieces and stuff." And he was crying. And so Mayor Hidalgo said, "Okay, that's what we're going to do." So she started making calls. She immediately asked for trucks to be sent around for City Hall people to be ready to help, and for rooms to be opened at the City Hall so that the art pieces could be saved.
Right.
And that's what they did. They started almost from the beginning. That's what saved those pieces of art. I remember thinking even at the beginning, I was like, okay, well, they're taking care of the art. At the very beginning of the evening, I was almost like thinking, okay, well, they're taking care of the art pieces. I'm going to take care of the people, which is my job as the local mayor. But it turned out that was a fantastic reaction they had to save all the stuff and do it so quickly.
Yeah.
Now, I was focused on, we're going to get a lot of people out of the island. We got to find them food, shelter, everything. So I asked for a place to be open. We have a major public building that I got open. I ordered, food and stuff like that. And I was really focused on getting the people out. I can tell you the end of the story is that as we were racing down the street and telling people to leave, the stuff started to fall on us. There was like pieces of burning, probably metal, that came falling down. I remember that things falling down on us. Wow. And by then the police told us, you leave now.
And then the whole island was
they shut down that street, and they only then decided to ask people to leave their buildings.
Right.
But we'd already started doing it. I'd already started doing it and was helped by one of the local person. So from that point on, that's when I started organizing for, I didn't know how long it was going to last and how many people we're going to have to host. So we opened that place. We spoke to the city, and the city also started to pull out resources. What they do when there's a big event, a tragic event, and unfortunately they have acquired some experience in this, is they open an emergency, we call an emergency room or war room, and that's actually quite close. It's on the opposite side from my city hall.
Right.
And they pull out people from all the various services, the departments of the city. So there are people from the police, from the security, from housing, from all the departments, and they're all together in one room so we can make quick decisions.
And everyone pitches in. It becomes kind of a
right. And everyone's related to everyone is in touch with their teams on the ground.
Right.
And we also have a presence from the police department. The Paris police department is there, plus a few officials from the state, so that we can coordinate better.
So this is the practical response. I want to talk as well about your emotional response, but also what is happening now and what's happening next. So if we kind of touch on first, you've explained what happened. How are you feeling when all these reactions are over,
Yeah,
this is in your arrondissement,
sure.
kind of the heart of your arrondissement. You can't be, what's coming through your mind?
Immediately, as completely focused on action, which surely was probably a way also to repress the emotions. I remember the first time that I felt like a strong, overwhelming emotion was the first time for that night when I stopped doing stuff. And that was probably about 2 hours after the fire, after I'd gone there. Those 2 hours, I remember having to charge my phone, somebody bringing me a charger because I was on the phone constantly or getting information. But about, I'd say 2 hours after we'd gotten there, all of us around 7, I think it must have been 9 p.m., I don't know, 9:30. It's when the president came in. We'd already been briefed by the chief fireman of Paris, General Gallet. But by then, when the president came, there was a special briefing for the president that only a few of us got taken out inside the prefecture, and the president was there, the prime minister was there, of course, Mayor Hidalgo was there, and he was next to her, and the prefect police, just a few people around the table, and that's when the head of the fire department for Paris gave us his first briefing.
Yeah,
and that was short, and that wasn't sweet. When he spoke, he said in a few words, and he'd gone there to the fire. He's really wearing his war outfit, and he said, "I need about 20 minutes to know if we can save it."
Really?
That was about as dry as that.
Yeah. And
for a moment, I wanted to. The economist, the risk planner in me wanted to ask, okay, what are the odds? And I just shut up because everyone was shutting up.
Right.
And we all knew what he was talking about. And at that point, he was talking about saving from disaster, from the full collapse. So at that point, the odds were, and the likelihood was that the building was lost.
Yeah.
And they were going to start a last-ditch effort to try and save it.
Yeah.
So when he said that, I think that everyone, from the president down to the edge that were there, we were all silent. And I think that's when we all first started to realize that we could lose Notre Dame, which is unbelievable. I don't think anybody could fathom that before. And because I was there standing doing nothing for the first time in about 2 hours, I had emotions coming up at that point. I said, my God, and I think everyone felt the same.
What did the president do?
He said nothing. I think he expressed his confidence
Right.
in these people. They said they were going to try a number of strategies they detailed, but he didn't want to spend time. He said, I don't want to spend too much time in the room. We have things to do. So that was pretty quick.
Yeah.
He made it clear that they were going to try dangerous things. They were going to go inside the tower. They'd actually gone by the time he spoke.
Yeah.
The two heads were there so that one could brief all the powers that be, while the other guy was leading the people.
Is this because there was a risk? I think I read that the bells that were held up by wooden beams could fall.
Yeah, one
like
of the big risks were that if the bells had fallen because of the fire that was very close to the towers, they probably would have made everything to collapse, fall. Everything caused everything to collapse.
So it could have been a lot worse as kind of.
Or we could have lost the whole cathedral.
Yeah, because they wouldn't rebuild it, would they? If the towers collapsed.
I don't know. I mean, I think it would be we don't know already, and that's probably going to be one of your questions. But we already don't know exactly what the project is today. But it seems not that complicated a decision to make. But imagine if everything had collapsed. I don't know. I think we'd be discussing how long and what to do.
That's a perfect segue into this idea of what's happening now. And I'm sure you get asked this a lot. At first, President Macron suggested 5 years. What is the latest on that now that we're 7 months in?
Yeah, I mean, I think those 5 years were sort of a motto. The idea was to match, pretty much to coincide with the Olympics.
Right.
2024, 5 years, it was 2024. I have been skeptical from the beginning. The reasons is not so much, whether we could do it in 5 years. It's not so much of a technical debate because truly it's missing one or two assumptions here. First of all, what are we talking about? What is it that can be built in 5 years? Yeah. And that what it hasn't been defined. We're more than 6 months into the fire now. We haven't had that decision or even that discussion truly as to what are we talking about when we say 5 years. So from the beginning I've said, well, let's first decide what we want to have there. And then we'll see how much time it takes. I think that things have to be put in the right order.
So the plan isn't even really there. I mean,
we're still debating whether there's going to be a modern gesture in terms of architecture, whether they should be building as is or with the same old techniques that were used. All this is still on the table. I have my views, but it's not so much the point. Point is that no one has made that decision or even pointed to what the process will be to make that decision. That's the first point.
You could put a big Coca-Cola sign at the top and get them to pay for it.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. That's for sure. I would fight against that, and I wouldn't be alone. But so there's defining what is going to be done, and then the other point that I made already a few months ago and has become even clearer now is that when do these 5 years start? When does the clock start ticking? Certainly not from the fire, because we're 6 months into the fire, and I can tell you we're still far away from phase A. And phase A is what they call securing the building.
Right.
That phase is not nearly ended yet. So, we don't know what is going to be done in 5 years, but we also don't know when the 5 years start.
Yeah.
And for sure they haven't started. And I can tell you I'm pretty sure that they're not going to start before at least a year after the fire.
Right.
It won't be before next summer until when they start building something, rebuilding. For now, they're still busy securing the building.
Sure.
And what they call securing the building encompasses a number of things, including taking down the scaffolding that's collapsed. So we're 6 months after the fire. We're in an ironic phase now when they need to secure the scaffolding now. They're going to reinforce. I don't know if you understand that. They're going to strengthen the scaffolding so they can take it down better.
That makes sense, because I was just down there now taking pictures before we met, and there's a lot of wood it seems to me to be wood that they've put in between all the flying buttresses or whatever they're called, like sort of wedged in. It looks like it's
right.
made of wood, right?
Yeah, all of that is really securing the building. They're making sure that that they're securing that nothing's going to collapse or move. That's really putting stuff to support the stones. They don't know. They still haven't explored the entirety of the building in terms of how it's lived through the fire, and not just through the fire, but through the water also. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of water that was poured down the building, and the combination of fire and the water, I think, may have caused a number of things inside the wood and inside the stone. So they're still exploring all of that, and there's parts where they can't go because there's lead and because there's a risk of a collapse. So we're still through that phase. We had a public meeting the second public meeting. I had one very close to the fire before the summer, and I had one again last week, and there were a number of people there, but including the architect in chief, Philippe Villeneuve, mm-hmm. and he gave he very seldom speaks. I think that's one of the few times that he spoke publicly. That was a really rare and very dear moment when he explained all that's going on. And I have these meetings. I sit in meetings every week since the fire. Every single week, wow. I sit in meetings with everyone that's in charge, and I hear some of the architects in chief, and I follow week by week what's going on. But I never heard it put that way. And certainly the people in the room were, I think, most of them that were thrilled. He really explained the philosophy of what's going on, as well as the details, the technical details. People have a lot of questions. Are you going to rebuild the same? Are you going to use the same tools? And I think what's emerging from that talk is what I already said, is we're not really close to the point when we are done with the securing of the building. Mm. And point B, it's not up to him. It's going to be, in the end, a political decision as to what exactly is going to be done, we do with the spire, etc., and how do we do it. But he already made clear that it could be that they introduce modern techniques, which is very different from whether or not we rebuild the same in the same way. Mm-hmm. There's what tools do you use, and then what do you do? Mm-hmm. And there's a third point that's very important to me and to a bunch of people, I think, too, is we should use that fire and that big opportunity to showcase, I think, our skill, our craft, and we have very ancient techniques. We have just a few meters from here, from my city hall, we have the Compagnons du Devoir, the companions. They're the ones that pass on from generation to generation. They pass on those techniques, whether it's cutting the stones or like cutting the wood, masonry, right, carving the wood, and, cool. And all that stuff. There is that those techniques are known. There's this expertise and this knowledge in France. Probably we also will need to train a lot of new people.
I've heard a lot of people are interested in this. There's been a big spike in people interested in stonemasonry.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
Exciting.
And I think that's going to create jobs. That's going to maintain that knowledge, that traditional ancestral knowledge, pass it on to new generations. So that's good. And I think we should show it. We should show it to the world. We should show it to the locals. And I for one, not alone, I have been really pushing for, at some point when that is possible, but I've been pushing for the construction site to be a bit more open and more transparent. And when I say open and transparent, I mean to let it look through. I would like for immediate residents, but also probably for tourists in a controlled way, to be able to stare inside, look at the reconstruction.
Fascinating.
That's going to be a showcase of what we can do in France, what we know how to do.
Cool.
And we've been talking with the various powers that be in charge of mostly different parts of the state, of the government, as to whether they could build a village, they call it an art village, where you'd have different people working different techniques, and for people to be able to watch that.
Okay, I know you're a busy man, so I'm going to do two really quick questions to round out this episode. The first is, have you been inside it since is it possible to go inside? Have you looked inside?
Yeah, well, I was inside at the very end of that night when the president wanted to go inside. I didn't stay too much there because I had a lot of other things to take care of.
Yeah.
But I went inside once, I think twice. It's a positive and a negative side. I think the negative is when we went there right after the fire. There's a lot of destruction. There was a lot of burned stuff on the floor, and that was a bit sobering. But then the good part was that the building was there, and we were able to be there. And I think it was after midnight. I think when we walked there, that there's all the water pipes on the floor, and we have to walk across those. But I think the fact that we were able to go there and the president was taken there, I think, made it clear he wanted to. But the fact that they would take him there and us along meant that they were confident enough. Remember, 9 p.m., the chief of police said to the president and the government in that room when we were there with the mayor, he told us that he might not be able to, he probably wouldn't be able to keep the cathedral. And a few hours later, that seemed like an eternity, we were there.
Fantastic. And last question, if you're talking to people out there who are tourists and who always wanted to climb to the top of Notre Dame and now feel they can't, is there something that you'd recommend that they can do instead in Paris?
Of course, there's a lot of things they can do, and I'm not going to talk to you about the Eiffel Tower because I'm sure they'll have that idea without me. But there's one place that I very much like. It's not too far from Notre Dame. It's from about the same periods. It's medieval, and it was beautifully restored. So it will give them an idea of what we can do and things that we know how to do. It's the Tour Saint-Jacques, the Tower Saint-Jacques. That's what's left of formerly a church that was called Saint-Jacques de la Boucherie. It's in that square that was built around the square around the tower. It's called the Square de la Tour Saint-Jacques, and it's right by Châtelet. When you're standing in the center of the Châtelet Square, between the two theaters, it's right in the angle over there. You can see that garden. You can see that beautiful tower. It's beautiful. Now you can't go at all times. You can only go during the summer, the long summer, extended summer hours. And there's an association that takes care of that. You got to register yourself, and they only take groups of 12, I think, at a time, because it's you go through the staircase. There's no elevator. You have to go through the staircase, and it's old, and it's
dizzying.
Yeah,
I did it after you.
I think you went there because I recommended it. Yes.
Yeah, you told me about it last time, and I checked it out. Cool.
And from there, you can see all of Paris. Beautiful. It's a beautiful scenery. You can see Notre Dame, but you can see everything else in Paris. And so I'd recommend that first. Of course, you can, if you prefer modern architecture, you can go to the rooftop of the Centre Pompidou, and you can do all that without leaving my arrondissement, the Forces, which is beautiful.
That's a clever answer, and let me take the time to thank you for giving us your thoughts on everything and the feedback. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That was the mayor of the 4th arrondissement. Thank you for your time, Monsieur le Maire. But yeah, that'll be a story to watch as we go forward to see how things develop. It certainly looks like we're not going to be in there again anytime soon. But one thing I didn't talk about that I think is kind of an interesting addition to the story is where I was when the Notre Dame was burning down. Now, I got down there pretty late. I was busy elsewhere. I was inside somewhere. And I saw all the texts on my phone. I talked about this on a previous episode, but I saw all the texts. I headed straight down there. I did a Facebook Live video that you can find. I'll link that below. But one bit that was particularly touching and interesting that I kind of encourage you all to go and check out is at one point I was walking over the Pont de la Tournelle on the left bank side, and around me there was thousands of people, thousands of Parisians just watching the fire. And it was quite late at night, and just really spontaneously everybody started to sing these hymns, and it was a really beautiful moment. And it was sort of then for me that I kind of, like, for me the Notre Dame's always been just a beautiful building, a piece of architecture before everything else. And until I heard everyone singing the hymns, it made me sort of realize the implications of the fact that it's a cathedral, and for a lot of people that's a whole different meaning. To them it's such a spiritual place, and it was really touching scene. So that little video, I'll link to it. In fact, there's a video just of them singing, which is really touching. Might bring a tear to your eye. I warn you about that in advance. But in fact, what I'll do is instead of the normal outro music here, I'll put a bit of that music in so you can have a listen to that. But as I said at the beginning of the show, we've got time for a quick email from a listener. But also a little tiny bit from French Today quickly. First, we'll start with an email. There was a lot of you guys maybe don't know that I have a mailing list that you can find pretty easily. I think if you just go on my website and scroll down a little bit on theeiffeltower.com, it'll prompt you to sign up for it. And most Fridays I send out an email, and that's when a lot of people respond with some Gmail that I like to read out. Here's a quick one from Kathy. She says, because what I wrote in the email is kind of big news that I've launched an extra podcast for you guys who are serious fans of this show and want a little bit more. Sometimes I do episodes on a private podcast link for Patreon supporters, and they're a bit different to the typical episodes that you'd hear on the show. It's not so much I have a guest in, it's kind of a whole different podcast. So I've launched it. It's called the Earful Extra, and I did an episode recently where I was talking about my Paris bucket list with a couple friends. We got this big competition going. Go and check that out. But I got an email in from Kathy Leno, and she says, the Earful Extra sounds like a great podcast. I love that you always come out with new and creative ways to keep your content fresh and interesting. Supporting your endeavors on Patreon is a very worthwhile investment. I urge your listeners who have not done so to sign up today. Each week I learn something new and interesting. As time goes by, I can recognize the ease at which you articulate and conduct your video and interviews. Keep up the good work. Kathy from Ohio. Thanks for those kind words. It's lovely, kind words like that keep me going. But what really keeps me going is the Patreon support. So you guys, like Kathy says, you're making this happen. So keep it up. And I urge you, with Kathy Leno, to sign up today. Hope to see you on the other side. Patreon.com/The Earful Tower. This show is also held afloat by French Today, as I mentioned at the end of all the episodes. FrenchToday.com/Earful11 will get you a further 10% off all their audiobooks. I was actually chatting with Camille, the voice from the audiobooks, and half of the company Camille is. And I said, I've got the mayor of the Marais coming on talking about the Notre Dame. Is there anything that you particularly want me to tell listeners when it comes to French on the subject? And she said, Oliver, just make sure everyone gets one thing right. In French, it's called Notre Dame, not Notre Dame. Because I think there's universities in the States and in Australia even, where they're called Notre Dame, but I think you pronounce it a little bit different. And so I think a lot of tourists probably come to Paris saying Notre Dame or Notre Dame. But as Camille said to me, it's a soft A sound like in the word papa. So Notre Dame. You can repeat after me if you like. Notre Dame, Notre Dame. And of course that means Our Lady. So French Today, you want to get much better lessons, in-depth lessons with a whole method for how to learn French. Check them out, FrenchToday.com/Earful11. They've been the sponsor of the show for almost a year now. They do great things. That's how I learn my French. You should do the same. But that's it for me for this week. There's going to be a few more episodes and a brand new season starting very soon. I hope to hear from you soon. And have a lovely week wherever you are. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.